and welcome to North West Employers webinar on scrutiny. My name is Sharon Senior and I'm Director at North West Employers. I'm the lead on our leadership development and counsellor development, and I'm delighted and excited to be doing this webinar for the first time. And I'm joined tonight by Steph Snape, Dr. Steph Snape. Steph has worked in the world of local government for over 30 years as an academic, as a consultant, as an officer, and specialising in political leadership and political management. As some of you may have seen Steph from the work that she's done over the years, working closely with us here at North West Employers as an associate. So welcome, Steph. Thanks very much for joining us.
I'm really excited.
Great stuff. And Steph is a self-confessed scrutiny nut, so I do believe we're in safe hands, we're in good hands for this webinar. So just to explain the purpose of it, or some of the practical elements of the webinar. We've scheduled for 45 minutes, so it's my role to keep us on time and make sure we stick to that. And there is an opportunity to interact. We want this to be a conversation with Steph today. So if you have got any questions that you want to put to us throughout the course of the webinar, you will find the top right-hand corner of your screen a control panel. If you click on the red arrow, that will bring out a little pop-out box. And about halfway down there, you'll see a box of questions. So if you type your questions in there and press enter or press return, and we'll get those through and we'll capture them and try and respond to them as much as we can throughout the session. So if you have got any technical problems, give us a shout and we want to make sure that you maximise it. We will be recording the webinar as well, so you will be able to pick up on that later. And if we don't have time to answer all of your questions, then we'll also have the opportunity to follow it up and share some of those responses with you. So, the format of the session, as I say, we want to make it a conversation, but you'll be familiar with the statutory guidance that came out in May from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. What we wanted to do was to give you the opportunity to explore this in a little bit more detail, explore what you're doing in your own councils, but to hear from Steph around what the guidance means and how do we bring it to life for those practising scrutiny in our councils across the region. So Steph, it would be great if you could just perhaps talk us through and introduce us to the guidance and give us a little bit of context for it, please.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, one of the things that I found with the guidance is how surprising it was. I was very surprised when it came out. Just to give you a bit of background, the guidance comes from a select committee investigation looking at scrutiny. So they made quite a few recommendations, some of them really interesting and powerful. The department responded to that, and as usual, it's kind of like, no, not doing that. No, probably not. Well, if they want, but no, we're not sanctioning it. So when I saw the government response, I wasn't that hopeful for the guidance. And then the guidance got delayed, so it was due out in December, and then it came out in May. And I printed it up, and I didn't have a great deal of hope for it, but it really surprised me. I think it's a very powerful statutory guidance, quite unusual in its format, and how much it really, I mean, the overwhelming message from the guidance is that central government believes scrutiny, overview and scrutiny is really important. It states that it's a really essential part of a well-functioning local democracy and that it has key roles also in driving improvement. So those statements and the implications behind what it suggests local government should do on the basis to achieve that, it's really powerful. Very exciting.
Thank you. And for those of you, if you haven't yet seen a copy of the full guidance, we have attached a copy on the webinar. So again, just above the box where you can put your questions in, there should be a handout attached there and you'll be able to access a copy. So as we're talking this evening, if you want to refer to anything, you've got a copy there as well. And if you haven't, and you don't want to access it tonight, you can always Google it and we can share a copy of the guidance as well. So, Steph, would you mind just talking us through some of the key themes that are in the guidance, just again to set the scene and set the context for it?
Yeah, and I would recommend you go look at it. It's not long. It's very user friendly. It's easy to read, 30 pages, and some of that you can read more than others. But there are a number of key themes that come out. And the one that you might have heard being talked about in your own authority or councils is the issue of culture. So that's a really key kind of key message that's come out. So the guidance very clearly states that overview and scrutiny has to be supported by leaders, cabinet members, senior officers, to have a very supportive organisational culture which recognises the role that overview and scrutiny should play. So it really is in a sense, far more powerful than simply saying you have these powers. It's actually saying the most senior people in council should be taking note and ensuring that their culture is supportive of overview and scrutiny, because overview and scrutiny is a key part of democracy. So the issue around culture, it has probably had the most, the highest message that's come out about it, but there are lots of other things. So they talk about that they want everybody in local government to have to know 4 things. So they should all know what the purpose of overview and scrutiny is. They should all know how to conduct it. They should all know what benefits it brings and what effective overview and scrutiny really looks like. Well, going around authorities, there aren't many where that's the case. I think where everybody knows that. So to me, this again, there's an underlying message here that overview and scrutiny is not just the responsibility of scrutiny members and officers supporting it, but having really healthy, effective overview and scrutiny is a responsibility to everybody, all the leaders in the council, and I think that's very powerful.
Yeah. And I think, sorry, that struck me when I read the guidance, and I think if we come back to the question of culture, because as you say, I think that opens up a whole new, a different conversation about how do we get that importance of scrutiny throughout the organisation. And again, just to give people the opportunity to reflect on that, we will be talking a little bit more about culture and what that looks like in your organisation. So if you do have any questions around culture specifically, please do start to feed those in, and then we can bring those back into the conversation. So culture is one of the key things, isn't it? And then there are a number of other things.
There are a number of other things indeed. And it's a very important question, which I know we're going to come back to, which is what's really the status of the guidance. And that's very important, and I know we're going to come back to that. I think there's also, it sets some lines in the sand, and it very much focuses on scrutiny being an independent place. So it talks about scrutiny councillors really being independent-minded, and that, I think, and therefore it also talks about certain lines in the sand in terms of cabinet not controlling overview and scrutiny, so you will come across scrutiny councillors who feel that they have been leaned on, so it's saying quite categorically you can't. It talks about the fact that there's quite a bit around access to information, and that overview and scrutiny really there should be a kind of premise. Just assume that they can have access to everything. Yeah. And if anything is sensitive, then think about, well, is it really an issue that can't be, or could it be done in a closed session? So something that came up in the original committee hearings is around, and I hear this as well, that we can't look at that because we're told it's commercially sensitive. Yeah. And often I thought if you push it really doesn't hold, that line doesn't hold. And I think it's possible to look at even commercially sensitive issues in a closed session. So I think there was some things here that were being said which you just think were being stated in black and white, which are very helpful, I think, to think about how scrutiny should develop its strong culture of independence and being able to both support and challenge decision making. And there was also quite a lot of just really good practical advice. I don't know if you felt that when you read it, but a lot of it is the kind of advice I give to authorities if I'm in an authority, whether it's an organization or whoever. And you just say, yeah, it's a really sensible thing.
Yeah, I think some things around like planning the work, you know, some that forward planning, but even sort of going back to selecting committee members in the first instance, setting the scene, and again, for me, that goes back to the whole culture around, you know, what is the appetite and what's the, you know, what's the view of scrutiny within the organisation, and therefore enabling that through. Yeah, absolutely. I think that for me is something. You know, there's guidance there, but then how do you bring that to life, and how do you make it really practical? And there is some.
It's really underwritten with a very practical eye, which again is quite surprising, and not always what you get in statutory guidance. So there's all that around planning. There's quite a lot about how you make recommendations. There's even ideas around using external experts, all the kind of things that I would recommend. Yeah. But it's great to see them in black and white being endorsed by government. I think, and even when you look at the organisational culture, and I think almost most is written about that, and they come up with 10 suggestions for how you can change the organisational culture. So it is quite practical at the same time as actually being quite principled and quite high level.
Yeah, and I think we're going to come on later to talk about how you've seen this being brought to life in organisations, some of that practice. But again, I know, you know, some of our organisations are using the guidance as a bit of a self-assessment. So as you say, that in that practical sense, there is something that you can pick up and use straight away, really.
It's very easy. Even the 10 suggestions on how you change the culture, I mean, they're very easy, and I'm developing the tool I'm going to be using next week, which will simply say, where are you up to on these things? It's very easy to make it into that, and I do believe the FPS has come up with a kind of checklist on it. So yeah, it's ambitious, it's kind of inspirational, it's empowering, but it's also practical. So yeah, and a surprise. A very good one.
And it's great, we're starting to get some questions coming through about culture, so we'll move on to that shortly. But one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Steph, some of you may know and will be active members of our Strategic Scrutiny Network. So we meet 3 times throughout the year, and it's chairs, vice chairs and officers who are responsible for the scrutiny function within organisations. And at the last meeting, we talked about the guidance, and we did some interactive sessions around what it meant for people. But one of the big questions that came back from the group, and kind of putting it out there to the group, was whether there was a sense that the guidance made. So I'm interested to hear your take on that.
Yes, and it seems like just reflecting back on when I read it, thinking, and then seeing there is a paragraph in there, which is very early on. I believe it's about it's literally page 5, so it's only the second after the ministerial forward. It's right there, and I think this was extremely helpful because it states very explicitly what the nature of the guidance is. So it says this is statutory guidance. Local authorities and combined authorities must have regard to it when exercising their functions. The phrase must have regard when used in this context does not mean that the sections of statutory guidance have to be followed in every detail, but that they should be followed unless there is a good reason not to in a particular case. I think it's all even more powerful that way, because they're saying, we're not telling you how to do it, and they make that point throughout. They say it's up to the council to decide what system works for you. However, it has to be powerful, it has to make a difference, it has to be well supported by leaders, and it has to be supported culture. But how you do it is up to you, and personally I think that's the right approach. But it's saying if there was for any reason why they might come and look at you and you haven't got a good reason why you haven't, then that's not going to sit very well. Yeah. So, but this is a question that I've talked with other kind of scrutiny people, like scrutiny officers, scrutiny counsellors, or the people who do the kind of work that I do and you do. And they said, well, how's it? Is it going to be policed? Is it going to actually go out and do this? And I suspect the answer to that right now is no. I don't think it will be actively policed. But there is actually quite a huge hint in the guidance, because it later on talks about the fact that scrutiny is looked at when it comes to a number of inspections.
Yes.
So, and you have to think of children's inspections, which look at scrutiny, ask. We're going to have a look at how a children's scrutiny committee or panel is doing, what impact they've had, what do they know about it. But also something like Northamptonshire and the investigations into the financial problems in Northamptonshire absolutely castigated scrutiny. So I think you'd be a very brave person to simply say, you probably, the odds are you're not going to. But I would also say, well, you're missing out on the potential.
Yeah.
Because scrutiny can add a lot of value. And we're 20 years into it now. So if councils are still struggling, it's time to get your head around it. It isn't, to me, it's not rocket science. To me, you can make some very practical steps.
Yeah, I think it's that opportunity to perhaps refresh, isn't it? Reinvigorate the scrutiny function and build on what you've already got. But actually, if you are out there thinking, well, how could we perhaps make it even more impactful, more effective? I suppose this gives a little bit of weight to that, I suppose, around as a framework here, so it might be easy to frame that against the guidance. So I think we've got other people joining us, so welcome if you have just joined us. I'm Sharon Senior from Northwest Employees, joined by Snape, and we're just in the middle of a really good conversation about the statutory guidance and what that means. We're inviting questions, and we touched on earlier, Steph, about culture, and there's some real appetites. We've got some great questions coming in around culture, around any suggestions for how do you embed this culture in an organisation. So two things, I suppose, any quick wins, but then also how do you then embed it so it becomes a more of a medium long-term perspective. So again, from your experience and the work that you've done, have you seen anything that's happening now, or that you've seen it previously that you think actually that's really good practice in terms of supporting this culture of effective scrutiny?
And it's always interesting to look at where I see really good scrutiny, and there are some authorities which I go into year on year they're doing good scrutiny. And sometimes it's because they've had a little bit of a head start when it comes to culture. So maybe they had a political and an organisational culture that was quite supportive of that way of working. But I do believe in most authorities, vast majority of authorities, you can make some steps. And some of it is about quick wins, but some of its culture can be very resistant. Well, I think culture eats strategy for breakfast. So some of it is about longer term. I think some of the most important things to do is for us to stop just thinking about scrutiny as a single entity, separate from the rest. To me, what this guidance is implying, and I think it's really finally got there, is thinking about the relationships between scrutiny and cabinet, between scrutiny and the party group. Let's talk about that. Between scrutiny and partners, between scrutiny and full council. And if you really want to change the culture, then it has to partly be a range of things. But one is supportive leaders, cabinet members, and chief exec and senior officers. And there's a term about some leaders who can be signal generators. They are signal generators. They're role models, and it's so easy to stamp on scrutiny by a chief executive maybe saying in a senior management team, well, I'm not that much over scrutiny. I really don't prioritise it. Or a leader not being positive. Whereas actually, I am seeing more and more cabinet members who are supportive of it. In fact, often tell me, well, I'd like a little bit more challenge. So I think all of those individually and collectively have to be signal generators to say we respect scrutiny, it's important, it has to break a role. And it's not that cabinet's more important, scrutiny is more important, cabinet, we have different roles. And understanding them, I don't know about you, and the work that we've done on scrutiny, half the time there's one view of scrutiny and scrutiny, there's another view in cabinet, and there might be several views in cabinet. So a shared common understanding, leaders who are supportive. Let's be honest, thinking about how we resource scrutiny. If you look to parliamentary scrutiny, officers of parliamentary select committees are not appointees of the executive, or they're completely appointees of the houses of parliament. And they do a lot behind the scenes in terms of research.
Yeah.
And yet what we've seen, the Centre for Public Scrutiny survey year on year shows the number of office support and budget getting downwards. And we've really, I think, should be thinking quite hard that how Cabinet has got all of the officer side. Come on, let's think about how we resource them.
Yeah.
So some quick wins. Having somebody in the senior management team who sits on the senior management team who champions scrutiny. Yeah, somebody on Cabinet who champions scrutiny.
And I know certainly back at the last strategic scrutiny network, and we talked about what we've done, to share some of these messages, and there were a few examples in authorities where they've taken the guidance and perhaps done a briefing paper for cabinet, but for the senior management team as well. And I think again, developing that shared sense of the importance of it and the value of it, I think is really useful.
Training is a really useful way of trying to move culture in a way that you get better behaviours and different, and then hopefully different norms. And but I believe in shared training. More and more I will say, look, let's get the cabinet in, let's get the senior officers in. We've got to do it separate to start with, but everybody needs to understand that. And I don't think scrutiny is the simplest thing for somebody to get their head around straight away. But if everybody hears the same thing and has the same conversations, it's so much more useful, including partners as well.
Yeah, and I think there's something about where it's positioned as well, isn't it? So is it about, its purpose is there to call in decisions, whereas actually some perhaps more forward-thinking authorities are using it to help shape policy. So it's ahead of the game really, so rather than being after the event, that there is, and I think that helps give some real focus to it and a sense of importance that actually, and from committee members, they are a key part of shaping some of those policies and decisions that are made.
Absolutely. To me, the phrase critical friend is quite a nice description. It's used a lot. Yeah. But what it is really describing the fact that there's a balancing act for scrutiny. On one side, it's doing challenge roles, so it's holding to account, and it might be doing call-in, or some of that holding to account might be quite a long time after through investigations. And that's the challenge role, and for that, the approach is often more of keeping some distance from the cabinet or executive the mayor. Whereas the other side actually is the friend role, and it can be much more supportive, and it's about potentially doing that policy development work. You could be a think tank, you can do horizon scanning, and that can be quite investigative as well. And I always think as a cabinet member, but there's one cabinet member, you've got loads of officers, but what a great way to get member ideas on something. And that is a support. So Critical Friends describes this support challenge, and that you've got to be aware when you're doing support, you get closer, when you're doing the challenge, you're often getting further away. But cabinet members should respect both roles. If they understand that there are differences, then they can understand, okay, look, that's a challenge role. And we're going to act professionally, respectful, it doesn't have to be adversarial, this is about challenge. And actually challenge is great for democracy, some sort of contestability. And it's all about, in the end, it's about better decisions for your community.
Well, and that brings me on to another question that we've had come in, which is great, and it's around how can scrutiny be an enabler for more humanistic organisations? And I suppose that made me think about the approach to evidence gathering. So in my mind, I suppose that what that triggered in me was, there might be some hard evidence and data, but actually how can we, increasingly have the voice of the community represented? And, is that a mechanism for bringing more of that person-centred approach into.
Yeah, because if it's humanist in terms of scientific, then that's the evidence base. And there's always been quite a strong emphasis in scrutiny on taking an evidence-based approach. Very much gathering oral evidence, looking at statistical evidence, and then analysing it and then coming up with recommendations. And it can be very strong like that. But there's also that person-centred, as you said, and the voice of the community, and maybe also an advocacy role. One thing that I sometimes really see that I find very powerful is that scrutiny can be an avenue to bring into the council sort of decision-making, policy-making processes, voices that aren't often heard, voices of users, carers, and that can be so powerful. So I think it's almost doing both. And there are lots and lots of examples of where, and you can do both. I suppose I just feel like that people-centred stuff is, it can really make officers, cabinet members, everybody sit up because you're hearing something you don't hear very often. I do think that lends itself to a councillor role because councillors are of their area and people. So to me it makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And we're going to move on shortly because there's a question that I think I can't ignore here, which is, have we got any suggestions on how to measure the impact of scrutiny? And something that made me think of, Steph, was having these sessions with you where we put the question to committee members to say, so if you look back on your last 12 months as a committee, what are you most proud of? What have you achieved? And that's quite I mean, it's a challenging question, but actually I would say in terms of the impact, you need to be able to answer that question and be very clear on what difference has it made. So again, interested in your take on that.
I'm totally agree with you. It's kind of a simple question to answer. I mean, it's quite difficult to answer, but it's a good question. And those kinds of review sessions, which you don't have to have any outside body to do that. I mean, obviously, if you do get an outside body, there are excellent ones for that. But you don't need, but just to have that kind of self-reflection. Because actually scrutiny is about learning, I think. It's about evaluating, learning, improving, and, contesting and prodding and challenging. So absolutely, one way is what some committees do it almost at the end of every meeting. They might say what went well, what didn't go well, what could improve. Some people do it at the end of the year or every 6 months. But if you are into that, I think it doesn't have to take long, does it?
No.
And then if you can also ask that of other people, if you can do simple exit surveys, if people come to talk to you, simply hand out some exit surveys, quite easy to do.
And it feels to me that I think because some of the formalities around scrutiny, perhaps we sometimes are in danger of losing sight of some of that. That's an easy question. Like, so an obvious question to ask, but do we do it? Do we encourage that kind of self-reflection that we might do in other areas of business, but we don't necessarily see that it's there.
Absolutely, it should. And there are more hard-edged tools which you can use. You can look at recommendations, but it's going to be a mixture of those soft tools and the more hard-edged, and you can. And then publish it in an annual report. The best one I ever saw was one that not only said, tooted its own horn about what it's done, but said we learned this, and actually this is what we're going to do different. So to me, that's a really great approach.
And again, you link that back to the culture, and if you've got an organisation where there is that learning culture, and that openness and willingness to learn and reflect. Great, thank you. I'll just touch, because again we've talked about some of the good practice, but just before we broaden out our question, I'm just thinking about going back to the guidance, and if there's any particular examples that you've got of how you've seen the guidance being utilised over the last few months since it was published.
So mainly what's happening with it, and I think this was born out by the network was that people are starting to use it. First thing is information. It's getting it out to people so that people understand. And it is, from a scrutiny perspective, it's really important to know what is the statutory basis of your function. We knew it was statutory, but you know, this puts another layer on it. So that was kind of the first level I'd say, and that's not consistently happening everywhere. So there are lots of places really there isn't that awareness that there's this new guidance that's come out and it's actually potentially really powerful. I've been using it in sessions more and more, particularly like reviewing and saying, okay, where are you on this? And I know that some scrutiny officers have been doing that as well as a kind of self-evaluation. So that's as far as I'm seeing it now. But it still feels to me like early days. I've also been using it in different formats. So I don't just do scrutiny, so if I'm doing top team or if I'm working with cabinet or leaders or senior officers, and I've used it in a top team situation and said, look, actually, this you need to know. Yeah. So it's starting to come in different ways. And I think what we'll then see from that is I'm using it more and more in development. I think it'll be used, and it is being used in training. The next thing is whole programs to see what people do, or if they hone in on certain parts of it or not, particularly what they're going to do in terms of organisational culture, and how many authorities are going to be really up for doing radical things.
Yeah. Thank you.
We've got to know what people are doing.
Yeah. And again, we've got our next strategic scrutiny network is taking place in November, at the end of November. So again, I'm sure this will be on the agenda to catch up and see what people are doing, because we're always interested in hearing from you and obviously sharing some of that best practice as well. So thinking about scrutiny in perhaps the broader context now, and again, we started to touch upon some of this, but what do you think councillors need in order to be effective scrutineers?
I think they need some appetite for wanting to do it. I don't know about you, but I find that councillors wear lots and lots of hats. They wear their party hat, they wear their ward hat or division hat, they're wearing, so many, the governors, etc., etc. So I think wanting to do it, and if I was a councillor, I'd find it a very interesting subject, because you can almost look at anything, and I like the idea of being able to investigate behind the kind of surface. So I think an inquiring mind, a willingness and knowing your area, probably in terms of just the area you live in and the people. People talk about all sorts of different skill sets and experiences, and I know if you took a health scrutiny, people talk sometimes about the importance of having more of a background in that technical area. But to me, the most important thing is this: having an inquiry mind, being willing to ask challenging questions in a non-adversarial manner. And be willing to take responsibility and not to wait for people to give you permission to scrutinise or to ask difficult questions.
Yes, isn't that proactive?
Yeah, being proactive. Yeah. It's a real role for leadership.
Thank you. So I've got a couple of specific questions that have come in that I thought we've got the opportunity to just put to you. So I don't know if this is quite specific, but have you come across a time where scrutiny chairs have been elected by a secret ballot in full council?
I don't think I've not come across that. I certainly know that some groups will elect scrutiny chairs in their political group. Whether that can then be played, I've never seen it actually done fully in secret ballot in full council, or nor have I heard of it, but I'd be really interested to hear about that. I think there are lots of issues around chairing, some of which are looked at in the guidance. And I think we need to talk more honestly and openly about the relationship between the political group and scrutiny and chairing. I'm doing something quite brave for me. It's only about a week away, where I'm going to do a session with the political group, looking at the relationship between cabinet, scrutiny, and the group. Now, normally, angels fear to tread anywhere near the group. I don't know how you use it. I start jittering if anybody. But I just think I think we need to be having those honest debates about it. I don't see it as scrutiny as somewhere where people can be opposition I see it as the role for the non-exec. It's not about the party divide. But some councils, councils will say to me, well, I think that's definitely, but it's not.
And another question that we've got from our audience is about how we see overview and scrutiny involving full council in recommendations and reports. So I think that's a specific reference.
It gets mentioned, it does. And I fully support that. I think the guidance talks about scrutiny perhaps making a decision. If something is a really important report that has some really wide-reaching recommendations, what a good thing to do to take it to the sovereign body of the council. The sovereign body is full council, and to me that seems really, really good and a good use of full council. And I think it's just about making those decisions, but that's when the judgment of the chair would come in and made. But I absolutely agree. I don't think full council is used enough by scrutiny. I mean, it does vary a lot from authority to authority. Some authorities, scrutiny really doesn't get mentioned ever in the full council. Other times they have a standing item. I think, some of these great reports that are done, let's discuss them in full council.
And it feels like it is more about that raising awareness and again, spreading that knowledge and understanding and perhaps, bidding scrutiny, I suppose, in terms of the role it has.
I mean, the scrutiny was, okay, maybe originally it was kind of a bit of an afterthought to creating the executives. But really, it's the check and balance in the system and how important that is. So, yes, absolutely, some of those big issues should be going to full council to be debated. Totally.
Thank you.
And should be introduced by the chair.
Some food for thought there. That answers your questions as we're going through the webinar. I'm interested, Steph, because you've got so much experience of working, obviously with us in the region, but more nationally as well. So interested in having looked at the guidance and what it says. If you've got any questions or what questions it's prompted in you.
Well, I think the kind of what it's prompted in me increasingly, and this is sort of where I'm thinking in terms of scrutiny, I suppose, more and more. I've been with that 20 years now. And a lot of those early days were about focusing on overview and scrutiny. And more now, I'm focusing on how scrutiny sits in the governance system. Actually, where is its place in the governance system? Not just the internal council, but externally as well. So one of the questions I had was, is this getting to the right audience? Because to me, this guidance is really timely because it's talking about actually everybody has to sign up, and therefore it's talking about the relationships in this wider system. But, as I said earlier, I'm taking the opportunity to talk to cabinet members. I recently did a session for cabinet members where I did a session on relating to scrutiny. And, a lot of them were not aware of the guidance. And I think it is, for all across the country. I think it's really important. So one of my questions was, are they getting this to the right audience? I think it will filter. I think it came at a time when it almost could have been missed completely. Everybody's eyes are elsewhere. So, and I would encourage, councillors and officers to actually move this to make sure a monitoring officer should definitely have sight of this. Yes. If you're an upper tier or a single tier, you're a statutory scrutiny officer. You should have one of those. Not every authority does, I find, but it's a legislative requirement. They have sight of it. Does the chief executive know about it? Have they discussed it with the leadership team? Is the leader aware of it? So it's getting it to the right audiences. And then I'm always thinking, okay, so how do we help with this? This is new guidance. So how can we help councillors and councils achieve this?
Yeah, and I think, you know, say we do lots of work with councils all over the region, so then it's for us to think about how we might do that. And you said, you know, some practical things there and some sort of guidance. I suppose it is thinking about, we certainly said at the next scrutiny network, that it might be something we want to just unpick. You know, we may choose a theme at a time, and just help to unpick some of that, make sense of it, and just again share some good practice.
Yeah, I think it's almost the first point is the conversation.
Yeah.
To understand what it is, the implications, and then part of that conversation is the case of how do we, you know, is there anybody here who's there? Because there are some authorities that are closer than others.
Yeah.
So what can we learn from that? And what I seem to be doing, and I mentioned this to you earlier, I'm doing a sort of a one-day conference on guidance in one region and a two-day event in another. And I know we said maybe, is that something that will be supported? Would that be something good for the North West? And the regional employees here have been very strong at doing stuff like that. So it will be interesting to
get people's feedback on whether that would be something you think, again, sharing some of those ideas and working through it together, then, so do, again, let us know if that's something that would be of interest to you.
I think in particular, unpacking the culture.
Yeah.
And what can we do to support that? And then how do we know it's making a difference?
Yeah. Great stuff. We've got some more questions coming in, so we've only got a couple of minutes left now, so just conscious of making sure we capture those for people. Well, that's an interesting one. So how's your experience of how scrutiny operates where the authority has an elected mayor who's an independent? So we've seen a rise of independent candidates coming through, haven't we, certainly over recent times. So if you've got any experience of
I've got experience in the last year of working, actually 3 authorities which have elected mayors, and but they're all party mayors. So I don't have experience of working with in an authority with an independent. What I would say of those 3 party mayors is, on paper, constitutionally, the mayor has so much more power. In fact, I was only working last weekend with an elected mayor, and you know, he said, yeah, on paper I've got lots of power, but I don't work it like that. And maybe party ones work it more like a cabinet and leader than they would an independent mayor who can really be more of a crusader. So not experience of it, but I think the GLA is very interesting. If you look at the Greater London Authority solution, that's interesting because although it's party, I think it's a very more powerful elected now in some ways than others. And that's been a rocky road from what I can tell. But I think it is interesting the difference between the written powers and often in practice, for whatever reason, culture maybe, or because they come from the party, you don't take the full extent of a mayor or that a mayor could do.
Yeah. Thank you. And one last question, because we are against the clock now, so this follows on from the conversation we had before about full council. And actually, is there any point in doing scrutiny study that actually the council can't really influence?
Yeah. Because,
there's definitely yes.
Yeah, and actually, because there are lots of things that go on in your communities which the council and the cabinet would find difficult to influence, and the media would find difficult to influence. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If something really matters to your community, then sometimes it's about speaking louder than the voice of like 1 or 2 people in the community. So yeah, but you have to make that balance. I think overwhelmingly you want to do work where you think you are going to add value and people are going to listen, but sometimes it's just too important not to, and it's about raising the issue up. And there have been examples of that, and I think it's really powerful stuff. when it goes well. So yeah, thank God do this all the time. Yeah.
Thank you. So we've reached the end of the time that we've got. I'd just like to say a big thank you to everyone that's joined us and for your questions, because actually that's been great, so that it doesn't feel like it's me sat here talking to each other. So it's great that you have such insightful questions, and we hope we've answered them fully for you. As I said before, we will be recording this, so you will be able to access it for future reference, and I think we have covered all of the questions. So just like to say a big thank you to Steph for being input this evening. It's been lovely having a conversation with you, and hopefully we have some more. So we will be interested in your feedback on how you found this. If you want more of it, do let us know, and hopefully we'll see you at the next couple of networks. We've got the Strategic Scrutiny Network on the 29th of November in Wyler Council, and our Councillor Development Network will be on the 6th of November in Rochdale. So we can continue the conversation. So thank you so much for joining us. Take care. Thank you. Bye.